Every day, more Americans are quietly stepping into the world of gun ownership, even if they've spent years opposing it. In cities and states where guns are often frowned upon, thousands are choosing to buy firearms under the radar, caught between personal safety concerns and societal judgment. They may talk about the dangers of guns in public, yet behind closed doors, they're arming up, thinking it's better to be safe than sorry. Regardless, there's a surprising rise in gun ownership among traditionally anti-gun Americans. We'll talk about why they're keeping these purchases a secret and the specific types of firearms flying off the shelves. Whether it's for personal defense or a backup plan for uncertain times, these quiet buyers are shaping a new trend in America. Grab a seat and let's dive into the hidden world of America's secret gun owners and what they're choosing to buy. The trend is hard to ignore. Millions of Americans, particularly in states with strict gun control and high opposition to firearm ownership, are quietly arming themselves. This isn't your typical pro-gun crowd. They're from places like Illinois, New York, and Rhode Island, states that lead the charge in pushing for stricter gun laws. And yet, more people than ever in these traditionally anti-gun areas are buying firearms, many for the very first time. But they're not just buying. They're keeping it quiet, blending into a hidden movement of Americans arming themselves under the radar. For many, owning a gun has long been something they'd never consider, especially given the strong anti-gun stance in their communities. Yet times have changed. In recent years, concerns over personal safety and the sense that help might not arrive in time have overridden previous hesitations. But because the anti-gun sentiment remains high in these areas, many of these new owners are reluctant to openly discuss their decision. They're fearful of backlash from neighbors, friends, and colleagues, which has led to a growing trend of gun ownership kept in the shadows. For every vocal advocate of gun control, there may be an equally quiet gun owner next door, quietly committed to their own safety. This secrecy isn't just about the personal choice to stay silent. It's also a response to the stigma that's often associated with firearm ownership in many areas. According to recent surveys, a substantial portion of new gun owners are people who, until recently, supported restrictive gun policies. Now, with the rise in crime and growing feelings of vulnerability, even some of the most vocal critics are reconsidering their stance. However, instead of openly acknowledging this shift, they're quietly purchasing firearms for home defense, aiming to protect their families without disrupting their public image. And the trend continues to grow. Estimates suggest that in 2023 alone, Americans bought around 17 million guns, with traditionally blue states seeing some of the highest surges in new gun owners. Whether it's the result of heightened media coverage of violent incidents or concerns over law enforcement response times, the reasons are deeply personal, and they're driving even the most unlikely Americans to gun stores. So what exactly set off this silent wave of new buyers? The answer lies in the year that changed everything and the lasting impact it left on American society. It was during the coup when America witnessed an explosion in gun sales that left gun stores scrambling to keep up. Again, not the usual crowd of outdoors enthusiasts or Second Amendment advocates, rather a new wave of unlikely gun buyers, people who, up until then, were more interested in gun-free zones than loading up a magazine. But thanks to the chaos unleashed by the coup, and later by the Biden-Harris administration's handling of public safety and law enforcement, millions of Americans, some of whom had previously supported gun restrictions, decided enough was enough. Economic uncertainty, widespread civil unrest, and spiraling crime rates forced even the most skeptical to ask themselves, who's really looking out for us? Let's be clear, 2020 wasn't just another election year. It was a reality check for millions who saw how quickly neighborhoods could become unrecognizable, how fragile public safety could be, and just how little Biden and Harris were willing to do to curb violence or address growing anxieties about the economy. Suddenly, people who had previously looked down on firearm ownership saw it as a necessary part of protecting themselves and their families. That year saw record-breaking sales, with the National Shooting Sports Foundation estimating over 8.4 million Americans became first-time gun buyers. While Biden and Harris preached reforms and made empty promises, Americans weren't going to sit around waiting to become another statistic. Since then, gun sales have steadied, but there's been a lasting shift in who's buying. The increase wasn't a temporary fluke. Formerly anti-gun individuals from traditionally anti-gun states, think places like New York and Illinois, have continued quietly stocking up, keeping gun sales remarkably steady. And yet, in a classic case of hypocrisy, many of these new buyers aren't coming forward. They're keeping it hush-hush, not wanting to admit that they've joined the very group they once criticized. Biden's America has driven these people to protect themselves, but they're doing it without admitting his government's policies have anything to do with it. This shift has redefined gun ownership in America, with formerly anti-gun groups now recognizing the need for personal security. So, who are these secret buyers? You'll be surprised at the type of Americans now heading to gun stores, cash in hand, to quietly arm themselves. Ironically, a huge majority of these people come from the woke left and are residents of the very states that voted in politicians who push for gun control are now seeing unprecedented numbers of their residents quietly heading to gun stores, cash in hand, trying not to be spotted by their neighbors. They might call themselves progressives, but these folks aren't buying firearms to put them on a mantelpiece. They're doing it because reality has hit hard, and they know they can't rely on Biden and Harris to have their backs. The demographics are even more surprising. People in their 50s and 60s, a group that usually isn't leading the charge for gun rights, are among the top buyers. This isn't a crowd that grew up at the shooting range or had any previous interest in self-defense. Many of them probably scoffed at the Second Amendment until recently. But when you're watching crime climb in your own backyard, it's amazing how fast you can change your tune. They're still voting for the gun control candidates while secretly loading up on firearms, hoping no one catches them packing heat in case things get rough. And they're keeping it quiet for a reason. Public perception matters in these communities, where being anti-gun has been practically a badge of honor for decades. The last thing they want is to face the judgment of friends or coworkers who might question their loyalty to the cause. These buyers are people who wouldn't dream of publicly opposing Biden or Harris, nor would they ever think of supporting Trump. Yet they're quietly admitting the reality: America's leaders aren't keeping anyone safe, so it's up to them. Of course, admitting that openly would mean recognizing Biden's policies aren't exactly working, and that's not something they're ready to do. But secrecy aside, the bigger question is, what's driving these people to buy guns now, after all these years? The answer? Fear. But fear of what? Under the Biden-Harris administration, the reality of personal safety in America has changed. Rising crime rates in some of the most vocal anti-gun states have left residents with a bitter realization. They can't rely on anyone else, not the government, not the police, to protect them. It's no surprise that citizens are quietly stocking up on firearms when major cities have essentially turned into crime zones. California, for instance, saw shoplifting spike by 39% in 2023, with violent assaults climbing from 128,798 to 135,046 in just a year. Robberies and car thefts also saw significant increases, with car thefts jumping from 181,815 to 195,853. This isn't just a minor blip, it's a trend that's got people thinking, I'm on my own here. New York isn't any better. In 2022, New York City reported a 22% rise in major crimes, with robbery and grand larceny taking the lead. And Illinois. Chicago experienced a 55% surge in motor vehicle thefts that same year, along with a 41% increase in thefts and a 14% rise in robberies. People are buying guns for home defense because, with these numbers, trusting law enforcement to have their backs feels more like wishful thinking than a reliable plan. And let's not forget D.C., where residents have seen homicides climb by 14%, robberies by 24%, and motor vehicle thefts by 4% from 2021 to 2022. These are people who once advocated for gun-free zones and tighter restrictions, but are now keeping guns in their homes. Reality bites. But what guns are they buying? Compact handguns have become a top choice for new gun owners, especially for those who want something practical for everyday carry. Models like the Glock 19, Smith & Wesson M&P Shield, and Sig Sauer P365 are flying off shelves, offering reliability, ease of concealment, and manageable recoil. People aren't just looking for any handgun. They're choosing firearms that will be effective in a pinch, ones they can count on when seconds matter. They know that dialing 911 is nice in theory, but when every second counts, having a firearm at hand is a better plan than hoping for backup. Then there are the shotguns, the backbone of home defense. For decades, guns like the Mossberg 500 and Remington 870 have been trusted to protect homes in rural and suburban America. Now, even the once gun-shy suburbanites are realizing that a shotgun is a must-have, not a last resort. The spread and stopping power of a shotgun make it ideal for deterring intruders. And the sound of racking one? Let's just say that's a universal language criminals understand. When you live in a country where police response times are dragging, having a solid shotgun for home defense becomes a no-brainer. And it's impossible to ignore the popularity of affordable AR-15 style rifles. Models like the Ruger AR-556 and Smith & Wesson M&P 15 aren't just popular. They're practically symbols of independence. These rifles are versatile, customizable, and reliable for everything from self-defense to rural pest control. In an era where even basic rights feel uncertain, people are gravitating toward AR-15s because they're the ultimate equalizers, a reassuring backup in Biden's crime-ridden America. It's a good thing a lot of these buyers are folks who once spoke against gun ownership. They include urban professionals, soccer moms, and retirees, people who once saw guns as something other people owned. They're becoming more vocal, which means gun ownership isn't going to be some fringe hobby for much longer. It will become a mainstream need. This movement could redefine how Americans view guns and self-defense policies. When once anti-gun communities are now populated by people who own firearms, expect the conversation to change. Public attitudes toward firearms are about to get a major overhaul as more people reject the narrative that gun ownership is inherently wrong. We're already seeing calls for policies that respect the right to bear arms, especially in areas where the police can't respond swiftly. The gun stigma is crumbling, especially as these new gun owners come to see firearms as essential to their family's security. And this isn't a trend that's going away. Diverse demographics are embracing firearms, showing that personal safety isn't just for one group. It's for everyone who wants control over their own well-being. The more widespread this becomes, the more we'll see calls for fairer, more sensible gun policies. And that's not all. There will be major economic implications. Manufacturers are ramping up production to meet the surge in demand for compact handguns, home defense shotguns, and affordable AR-style rifles, a boost that's leading to job growth and expansion in the firearms industry. Local businesses, from gun shops to shooting ranges, are also benefiting as first-time buyers look to learn the ropes. Under a Trump administration, this trend could accelerate as his business-friendly approach is likely to support manufacturing growth, reduce bureaucratic barriers, and further strengthen America's gun industry. Beyond just firearms, the broader economy is seeing a ripple effect. With increased spending on manufacturing, security, storage solutions, and self-defense training, Americans are investing in their own safety, creating jobs, and driving growth across multiple sectors. This movement towards self-reliance is setting the stage for a more resilient economy. Want us to do a deep dive on how Trump's economic policies could support this movement? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights on America's evolving landscape of self-defense and economic strength.